Aerosmith frontrunner Steven Tyler has done some deplorable things, but is it illegal? I brought in Christopher Melcher to break this one down. Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signore, and get ready for a tough conversation, because I know this might not be as popular to say, hey, Steven Tyler didn't actually do anything wrong. It's more complicated than that. And I brought in Christopher Melcher to help us break down the law in this case. Good to see you, Christopher.
Good to see you, Andy. Yeah, we've been working on this story for a while. It broke in December, and it's kind of developed a little bit more about a month ago. But, we've been looking into quite a bit of detail. So happy to be talking with you about this case.
Yeah, I mean, to be fully transparent, we recorded this video last week, and I didn't have the sound working, and we had to redo it. And in doing so, I did some more homework afterwards and actually learned about the age of consent. And that's where this thing gets more complicated as you get the details. And the truth is, as I learned with the Johnny case, we learned with every case, all the evidence matters. We got to hear all things out. And so there's definitely more to this case that I found intriguing. Now, does that mean I still approve of what Steven Tyler did? No. But again, what I want to focus on is, did he perform a crime? Is this actually criminal? So let's break down, Christopher, what we know so far. So again, got to be careful on the language of what he's accused of. But also what's interesting, and I still can't figure out, the claim of SA has been put against him, but it does seem like it's more about the fact that she was a minor more than actually the act of SA from everything I've gathered. She has made a lot of... Can you explain why this is able to come out now? I think that's let's start there, right? Because the law changed in California where people were able to come out and sue people that had done stuff to them that they may not have been able to do previously. Can you explain that for the viewers?
Yeah, sure. So in California and several other states, they allowed people who were victims of some bad stuff a long time ago to come forward in a short period of time that window ended December 31, 2022, I believe, to go make these suits that otherwise would have been time barred. So these are, for example, maybe a claim against a priest or a Boy Scout situation, something like that, where things happened a long time ago that were wrong. And but due to the way that, unfortunately, our society was looking at some of those matters back in the day, they were not really, even though legally they could have sued, they probably wouldn't have been believed, they would have been supported. And that's why many of those claims were never brought within the time limit that the law provided. So California and some other states said, hey, we're going to open up a new window to allow those old claims to be brought. And there's some safeguards around it that they can't name the accused. They have to say John Doe. They have to go to a judge. They have to convince the judge that there's enough evidence to go forward. They have to get a declaration from a mental health professional, some kind of due diligence, and then they can bring the claim. And that is the law that she is operating under. Now, there's a whole big backstory here. And what's interesting about the story is that both sides agree that the conduct occurred. This is what's unusual, remarkable about the story, is both Steven Tyler and Julia Holcomb, who has brought her name forward, so we're not, outing her or anything, have publicly stated that they had this relationship when Steven Tyler was 26 years old, a rock star, and Julia was 16-year-old girl away from home. She had a very difficult childhood, and she was away from home and wound up backstage at an Aerosmith concert and meet Steven Tyler. She's 16, he's 26, and they started a romantic relationship. There is no dispute about that happening. Both of them agree that happened. The question is whether it was illegal or whether he's going to have to pay damages as a result of that relationship.
Right. And this is a civil case, mind you, not a criminal case. That's important to put distinction. But also, all this came to a head because Steven admitted this in the autobiography Walk This Way of Aerosmith, written by the band and another writer. And in that passage, we have some of the passages here. She was 16. She knew how to nasty, and there wasn't a hair on it, he wrote. He admitted to becoming the girl's guardian to be able to travel with her across state lines, writing, her parents fell in love with me, signed a paper over for me to have custody so I wouldn't get arrested if I took her out of state. I took her on tour with me. With my bad self being 26 and she barely old enough to drive and sexy as hell, I just fell madly in love with her. She was a cute, skinny little tomboy dressed up like little Bo Peep. She was my heart's desire, my partner in crimes of passion. Now, this is just creepy. I'm not going to lie. It's a creepy read, but there's an important part here that I underlined. So I wouldn't get arrested if I took her out of state. And that's where things sort of turned as we now have revisited this case. I wanted to look that up, Christopher, because I saw some people making this defense. And the age of consent varies by state. Now, right or wrong, don't shoot the messenger, guys. But in certain states, including Massachusetts, where this happened, correct? The age of consent was 16, especially back in the 1970s when this was like less frowned upon. Not that that justifies it. But that definitely complicates this case, does it not? If this was the legal age of consent at the time, and this was not she was then by law not a minor, does that change this case?
Well, certainly it does, and I'm not sure why she's suing in California. That her complaint, which I have read, doesn't make clear what the California connection is, but she does talk about them living in Massachusetts, and that there was an apartment that she was living at that he had provided for her while he was on the road. There was a fire at that apartment. She was nearly killed and had smoke inhalation damage, but kind of miraculously somehow survived that. The firefighters got her out alive, and she was in the hospital, and Steven Tyler came there. And so, as Andy, you've noted that the age of consent, and I'm just going on what Wikipedia says as of today. I haven't gone and looked at the law, but at least what Wikipedia is saying, and the age of consent in Massachusetts, even to this day, is 16 years old. So, and I was surprised because I just assumed incorrectly that you'd have to be 18 to give consent to have an act like this with an adult. But we're seeing, at least again, according to Wikipedia, there's many.
Well, this is mass.gov, Massachusetts law, the gov.gov website. A person 16-year-old is legally capable of consenting.
Yeah.
Now, right or wrong, that's not what we're here to debate. I don't want to get into that debate. It seems young to me. But that certainly changes this case, because I've seen a lot of people out there saying, oh, he's, I don't want to say the word, but I don't know. I haven't seen a pattern of this. This is clearly something he did. 26, still pretty old. It's not like he was even in college. But yeah, it does change my eyes on the case a bit more and wonder, is there more to this? I mean, she has been out there doing a lot of press she did before all this started. And she was here on Tucker Carlson. We don't have to play it, but you can go find it. But before this lawsuit was able to be filed, her focus was really about the abortion. She is a pro-life activist who is very now upset about it later. But even through all these interviews, it's odd. That's really what she was focused on, and why she was most angry, it felt like, was that he didn't want to have this child, according to her. And, she doesn't even really bring up any of these other allegations that are now all over the headlines that you guys are seeing on TMZ and everything else. And look, I just don't like the media spinning the most nefarious headline when you really go and learn the truth about it. You got to actually share the truth, right, Christopher? So again, what's the charge here? Is this going to help his case? You've gone through the filing, the fact that she's saying SA, but relying on, I was a minor, so I couldn't give permission. But in the state of Massachusetts, technically, well, then, yeah, you could have. Where does this case, you think, stand now?
Yeah, it might be one of these cases where, just because it's legally right to do something doesn't mean that it's right. You're still wrong. And I understand different times back then in the 70s, but gee, he's 26 years old. He's a rock star. She's essentially a runaway. So it reflects.
He's taking advantage of her. Absolutely. Just to be clear, 100%. I don't want, please don't make it seem like I'm endorsing it, but by the law, you can still get, I guess from a civil case, there can be a moral guilty.
Well, yeah, it's so there's some differences here. One, like you noted, it's not a criminal prosecution. So this is a civil case, and what she's essentially claiming is that there was this romantic relationship, although Stephen might or will say it was consensual and loving, that she, even though legally she could have given consent to the acts in Massachusetts as a 16-year-old, she was still taken advantage of. He was in a position of power. She was in a position of weakness. He took advantage of that. And this was damaging to her. She didn't sue before because she couldn't. That was time barred many, many years ago. And that window at least opened up in California, if she can even sue here legally. Didn't open up until recently. So her story before, and I've read it, and it's a very powerful story. She didn't say that he like physically did something like assaulted her or whatever. She was saying he was in this relationship. He was 26, and that after that apartment fire, she was declared by the doctor to be healthy, and that the baby, who was 5 months old at that time, was healthy, and that the doctor said you don't need to terminate the pregnancy. But according to her, Steven Tyler came in and said, no, you need to terminate the pregnancy because this child is been hurt by the smoke inhalation, and that she did not want to. She argued against it, and he basically, again, according to her, either do this or you're out on the street. And so she says she was coerced into doing that, and I mean, a 5-month-old baby, and that she was as she say, there was one person on earth that was there to protect that baby. That was her. And so, of course, that would be highly traumatizing to her to go through. And that's the story that she's been telling over the years that was most traumatizing to her as a result of that relationship. So, hey, I fine, he can't be criminally prosecuted for doing something with a 16-year-old, I guess, under the laws of Massachusetts at the time. But that doesn't mean he can't be sued for it. And it doesn't mean that a jury wouldn't award damages. My question is, okay, what happened in California? Because they're suing in California. There has to be conduct in California for the California court to have any jurisdiction over it. So,
well, could it be because they left the state lines on tour and there were incidents that happened in California while they were together? I mean, that, I guess, could prove the consent law would be different. If she's with her, Massachusetts, fine, it's legal, but then they go on tour and they're in California, does that actually then make it so he did commit a crime?
Well, so there is definitely going to be a question of what conduct actually occurred within the state of California to give the California courts the power to hear this or have a jury determine it. And so certainly anything that happened in the state of California is going to be actionable here, and she'll get to trial on that point. Things that happen in Massachusetts generally have to be sued there, unless that was a temporary absence from their residency in California. Then I could see that would be part of the relationship that would be actionable in California. So there's a bunch of issues concerning that. But I think, again, my takeaway is 26-year-old guy in position of power, having a romantic relationship with a runaway 16-year-old. I don't care what the law is in Massachusetts. That's just wrong in my book. And for him to, in modern age, so even if in the culture of the 70s, that this somehow was okay, and that her mom had signed, I mean, her mom did, both of them say, the mom of this girl signed away.
Yeah, none of these are good defenses, though.
It's just like,
still look creepy as hell.
Sounds really abusive. And so even if it was right then, this guy, Steven Tyler, brags about it in 2 books in modern day, brags about it. And so, I mean, to me, it's just like, he should not be bragging about it. He should be ashamed of it. And sure, that's part of his past and he can talk about it. But she was 16. She knew how to do the nasty. With my bad self being 26, and she barely old enough to drive and sexy as hell.
There wasn't a hair on, dude. It's gross.
I mean, this is gross. you know, like, wow, looking back at it now as a fully grown man, I realized that, you know, this was wrong. No, this was like, look at me. I'm a rock star. I could do stuff like this. I'm cool. So to me, he's got it coming. More power to you, Julia.
Yeah, well said. I mean, that's where I'm at because it's like what's interesting about this case is did he do a criminal act? Doesn't sound like he may have, annoyingly, but it doesn't mean we can't still dislike what he did and condemn what he did. And I wish he would just take accountability like that. You want to blame the past, but own up to it now, right? And say, look, that was what we did. Doesn't justify it. I feel terrible looking back upon it with my own daughters, the way I was taking advantage of that poor girl. Julia, I'm sorry. Like, there's just a way you can do that. But at the same time, that opens him up legally, right? Like, because I wonder, could there be more? Did he write that passage? This book was, you know, the autobiography by Aerosmith with Stephen Davis. I don't even know. So I'm just a little hesitant to just lean in and assume that all of that was him. But if it is, yeah, I gotta agree with you. This is definitely worth condemning. Any other final thoughts, Christopher?
Yeah, well, when he made those statements, none of these states had renewed the opportunity to sue. So that all came up in, you know, within the last 3 to 5 years where states said, hey, you know, we're going to allow people to sue from stuff that happened in the 70s. So when he wrote this, he didn't realize he was signing a confession.
Now it's going to eat him it's definitely going to bite him in the back, which will be nice justification. He's going to have to face this and just admit, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Which I wonder if she would have accepted had he just owned it. Or just settled out. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. It did seem like there was an attempt at a settlement, correct? At a certain point, the leaking of the name, it does seem like they were in talks, an attempt to put this out, and then eventually she said no. That broke down, and this went public, correct?
Yeah, I don't know that, but I surmise it because she sued right at the end of this deadline in December of 2022. So she's obviously known about, you know, this because she's been talking about it for over 10 years. So I surmise that she would have approached his representatives and said, hey, I'm going to bring this claim. And maybe they talked and couldn't come to terms. And then she went out and sued.
Well, there you go. I'm curious what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on your way there. Hit that button, hit that bell so you get notified. Smash that like button. And yeah, what do you think? Do you despise what he did, but did he do a crime? Are you team Steven? Are you team Julia? I want to hear your thoughts down below. Either way, I know we're all team Christopher. Thank you, Christopher, always being here. You can check out Christopher Melcher over at CA_divorce. Follow him. Always a pleasure, sir. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back with more content soon here on Popcorn Planet.